Hello and welcome to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. I am Dr. Michael Lennox, your host. Your co-host and producer Zoe is in the house. Hello, Zoe.
What's up?
How you doing this fine week now that eclipse season is somewhat behind us?
I'm good. I thought that I wasn't really feeling eclipse season, and then I looked back at my last week and I was like, oh no. Oh no, that was very present. And so I feel really wonderful to be on this side.
On the other side of it, thank you, you're welcome, sorry, not sorry.
Yeah.
So we're coming at you for the week of December 13th through the 19th. It starts off as a bit of a quiet week, but it ends up with a bang because we've got our full moon over the weekend on the 18th, that's Saturday. And then on Sunday, the very next day, Venus turns around and starts her retrograde off. So it's going to start off a little bit slow and quiet, relatively speaking, of course, but it's going to end with a bang. And so before we, dive into the full moon, I think it's always a good idea to really ground in some clarity and lessons about the Venus retrograde cycle because it's just going to be so important for us. And it begins at the end of this week in earnest. And so I want to do a little bit of reviewing about Venus and the power of a retrograde, and then we'll dive into the full moon on Saturday. One thing about guiding y'all through a Venus retrograde is that this is going to be a very distinctly personal experience. All of the personal planets reflect our personal experience, meaning our individual experience. But there's something about our thinking and our thoughts and our mentality that, to me, seems a little bit more like ubiquitously human, meaning most people have a relationship with their thinking, their thoughts, and their communication that's relatively universal, human to human, so that if Mercury, the planet of the mind, is going retrograde, and I'm going to do a teaching about your thinking and your communication processes are going to be rewired, while even in our thinking and our communication, everybody is different, individual to individual. In the world of thought, there's not quite as much variety in how someone thinks and communicates in a manner that makes one person's Mercury retrograde dramatically different from another person's Mercury retrograde. We're all bumping into the furniture, and we're all processing how we think and communicate differently. But once we get into the land of Venus, we're in the emotional body. It's a very different construct. It's the feminine aspect of being human, which means it's malleable and fluid, and the distinction of how you as an individual process your emotions versus that individual or that individual is so, varied that it as an astrologer leading you through the experience, what I have to sort of convey is the Venus retrograde is going to rework how you, listener, relate to your emotions, your emotional body, your experiences of love and intimacy. And since we're all so very different in our emotionality, the process is going to be different for each person in a kind of a dramatic way.
I find that our emotional bodies can surprise us even.
Oh, I love you saying that because absolutely they can. And one of the things that is a measure or a marker of someone's greater sense of personal integration is the ability to interpret the emotional body and what it's expressing without being taken down by the feelings so much that you can't make sense of anything because you're just in an emotional wash. Whatever the experience winds up being for you as an individual, one of the things that can happen in a Venus retrograde is you can become more attuned to the incredible storehouse of information that our emotions offer us when we don't get tripped up by trying to figure out what they mean or overwhelmed by the presence of them. And so you're saying that the emotional body can surprise us. One of the things I would invite listeners to consider during this entire couple of months is how they relate to the information that the emotional body is offering up. Now, we are people of mental capacity. We are thinkers and expressors of mind. One of the ways we do that is when an emotion arises, rather than trip down the emotional sort of swirl or intellectualize your way away from the emotion, and believe me, asking your mind to tell you why you feel something is intellectually pulling you away from the feeling. Because you're using your mind.
Can you explain that a little more? Because honestly, I like being able to do that right now. I'm in my late 20s, and I've reached a place where more often than not all the time, of course, but I'm able to let these emotions arise, and now I can say, oh, I'm currently angry because this sub-emotion of anger, and that is what made me angry, so let me just take some time.
Well,
would you say that's taking yourself away?
No.
'Cause I like that process.
No. In fact, so you just, in your way, kind of modeled this tool that I'm about to sort of share, right? My tool, how I would language the tool is what you want to start practicing, and a Venus retrograde is a great time to do this, is a feeling arises. One thing you can do is stop the moment, the momentum of your life, take a pause, turn within, maybe put a hand on your heart and one on your belly and take a breath and say, what does this feeling have to teach me? What does this feeling have to offer me? Which is really what you just described.
Okay.
So, during a Venus retrograde process, I invite all of you to begin to view and witness how you and your emotional body relate to each other. What do you do when emotions rise up, when you feel constricted? Another thing that's a tip and a tool that comes out of cognitive behavioral therapy, when somebody is thinking their feelings too much, it's a great time to introduce this little tool and tip about relating to your emotional body, is where you start, instead of intellectually figuring out what the emotion might mean, you go to the body. What am I feeling in this moment? My chest is tight. My breathing is shallow. I'm feeling a little sweaty in my palms. Now what you're doing is organizing your sense of how you relate to your emotional body as something that's in your body, not in your mind.
Oh, okay.
Your feelings are not in your mind. That's right.
Somewhere else.
That's right. So what you did, Zoe, was an intellectual, let me follow my intellect to tell me what's the sub-feeling and the anger that's below. But you've got self-awareness. You've got a bunch of years of self-investigation. You're someone, most of the people who are listening to this podcast would fit into that category, right? Mm-hmm. So I think I'm talking about the distinction of what you described, which was using what you know in your mind to help you investigate a feeling, vis-a-vis the exchange that I sometimes have with my friends who are 28 or so, when I say, oh, I'm having this feeling, and the first question they say is, why? It's like, who cares why? I don't give a shit why I'm having the feeling. I just want to make sure I honor it. If there's something I need to know about it, what can I know about it? But the mind isn't as helpful in those queries as the body is. And then, of course, the mind will whisper, here's what it is, if you're paying attention. But these are the kinds of things to be in consideration during a Venus retrograde. Of course, part and parcel to any intimacy, relational experiences that morph and shift and twist and go through processes. Because trust me, everybody's love and intimacy life is going to go through some twists and changes as this month finishes out and as January unfolds. I want to talk about a thing called stationing, because Venus is stationing right now. Stationing is the word that means slowing down. Well, coming into the station. Think of a station, train station, right? The train does not keep going when it gets into the station, right? And it doesn't go from its regular speed to stopping, because if it did, it would crash into the station and there would be ruin and wreckage and death. But the train slows down, stops, and then reverses, backing out of the station, right? That's what a train does. Well, that's what a planet does as well. Venus, in particular, moves at about a degree a day. That's her clip. She will move about 2.5 degrees between now and the 19th when she goes retrograde. So she's not moving because she's pulling into the station. She's slowing down, getting ready to turn around. When a planet is stationing, and this is true of Mercury's retrogrades, personal planet retrogrades, social and outer planet retrogrades, anytime a planet is not moving at its regular pace, which we call stationing, its power is at its most objective. Think about it, it's like pouring its energy down from us. It has stopped moving, like she's zipping across the sky, but now she ain't zipping. She's standing still and pouring her energy down to us. So it's a subtle way that emotions get a little bit richer and deeper, maybe more confusing, maybe more passionate and yummy as well. So let's not forget that all things have an aspirational end and a shadow end, right? So Venus retrograde and her station can open our hearts to just more richness. But of course, that slowing down can also bring more intensity. So here's where, again, the individual experience comes in. Person A, who's just moving through life and all is well, and they're focusing on what they're focusing on, will have a less intense experience of this station and Venus's subsequent retrograde than the person who's in a complicated relationship where they're going to be going through negotiations and permutations of how they exchange love and intimacy, and then everything in between. But it's really important in terms of understanding the weather of this week is that Venus isn't moving and she's hanging out with Pluto. She connected with Pluto on the 11th. We talked about that in the last podcast, but she has not moved since. And between then and Sunday, when she turns around, she basically isn't moving. So on an individual basis, meaning everyone's going to feel this a little differently. So I don't want to say it's going to feel like this and then have you say, well, it doesn't feel like that at all, because it's going to be different and individual. But there's some way in which everybody's emotional body's going to be a little bit more sensitive, expressive, and in some kind of permutation. So feelings might get a little complex. The fact that Venus is near Pluto in this slowdown station means we have access to the shadow. That's like good news and bad news, right?
Yeah.
So if we're in a comfortable relationship with the shadow and the hidden depth and the things that might be rising up in your emotional life, then there's a benefit and blessing to Venus being connected with Pluto all week long. But if you're uncomfortable with scary, dark, territorial feelings or the things that love includes that are harder to navigate, stuff may be coming up during the week that you want to be mindful of so that you can take anything you learn this week into Venus's retrograde that starts on Sunday and have that 6-week process benefit you even more deeply. I think this could be a really fun full moon.
More so than other ones?
Well, yeah. So let's talk about that for a minute. Let's talk about all of the aspirational qualities of this particular full moon and what the weekend can bring. First and foremost, Sun is still in the Sagittarius mansion, and the Sagittarius mansion is just filled with the delight of joy and fun and expansion and experience and stimulation. It's Jupiter's mansion. Jupiter is the great expander. So the entire time that the sun is in Sagittarius, our conscious awareness is more aligned with what Jupiter's message is for us in bodies, which is life can be fun, stimulating, and expansive, and there's a plethora of things to explore and enjoy while you're here. So that's yummy.
Full moon in
Gemini. So Gemini Sagittarius is all about thoughts, words, communication, ideas. In Gemini, we invented words. And so ideas spring up out of a consciousness of language. It's in Sagittarius that we evolve those words and ideas into beliefs. So when the moon is full in the sign of Gemini and the sun is in the fun-loving expansion and in stimulation adoring Sagittarius, and the moon is in flirty, talky, fun-loving, Gemini, it's a full moon that can be enjoyed socially, interactively, playfully, a lot of playful energy in a Gemini full moon. And Jupiter, the ruler of Sagittarius, is in an exact trine with the moon this weekend. That means this big wave of energy that every full moon brings is amplifying all of this joyful, playful, interactive, chatty, flirty, yummy Gemini desire to connect and know and interact. Also has this huge wave of optimism and confidence by virtue of Jupiter's gorgeous placement in this triangle with the full moon. From just the perspective of the full moon brings amplified energy, and that's a fun wave to ride if you're not suffering in something that you're, working on. We'll get to that in a minute. There's just a gorgeous, playful, exuberant amount of energy along with the full moon. So in the gratitude portion of every full moon, of how we want to approach a full moon, it should be easy, in fact, to come up with a sense of gratitude for all the ways that your life is. All of that. Fun, flirty, chatty, interactive, filled with ideas that light you up. The joys of communicating and expressing and being in interaction with others in community. All the yummy aspects of Gemini is what we want to focus on, our sense of, delight at what we've created in this arena of our lives. And certainly from the spiritual seeking element of what Sagittarius brings us, then part of what the full moon gratitude can be about how you dial into your spiritual connection on an individual level, because your spiritual practice is deeply personal. And this is a moment to sort of, talk about it, know about it, think about it, and be in communication about all the things that bring you joy. Now, every full moon is also about release. Letting shit go. This becomes then a really important full moon because it's the last lunation in the Sagittarius-Gemini polarity before the nodes of the moon change signs and leave the Sagittarius-Gemini polarity. So this whole last 18 months of the North Node in Gemini has been leading to an eclipse season. And though the eclipses are behind us, we're still in a lunar cycle that was kicked off by an eclipse in the Sagittarius mansion. That we are called right now to let go of anything and everything in our minds and in our hearts that would inhibit us from rising up to a higher level of living our beliefs, living our truth. One of the difficult things about living your truth is to know that your truth and my truth may be different. And if I want to kill you off for having a truth that's different than mine, then I ain't living in a very high truth now, am I? This is a full moon for that release. And as I'm always fond of telling people, I am not the teacher that's going to tell you how to go out into the world and have those difficult conversations that need to happen, because I'm not so sure that I know anything about that. I mean, I'm kidding a little bit, because in my personal life, I meet every conversation with the most sort of, the highest level I can, right? But in a general sort of way, as a teacher, what I can do and assist on the planet is help all of y'all have an inner experience of knowing what truths you want to build your life on and ideas that you want to let go of that don't serve you. And one of those might be something like, my truth is so important to me that if you believe differently, I have to kill you off. And you might want to think about letting that go a little bit because that doesn't serve anybody. Mm-hmm. At any rate, there's plenty of room in this full moon to assist the release of anything that would not only inhibit your ideas from rising up to higher sort of vibration, but also your emotional body, because the angle between where the moon is in this full moon and where Venus and Pluto are is almost an exact inconjunct. The full moon is creating the great eliminator angle with Pluto and Venus, as Venus is literally standing at the edge of the pool going, I'm about to dive in. So we have this full moon on Saturday with this fork in the road eliminator aspect with love and the shadow hanging out together. And it's like, just as we sort of say, huzzah, I'm ready to let go of this or that, Venus comes along and says, I'm going to help. I'm going to dive into the unconscious for the next 6 weeks and help you honor the very changes to how you think and how you feel and how you express those thoughts and feelings so that you can bring more peace, more love to all your interactions. And that is how Peace for Humanity begins.
Have at it. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. This week for our dream segment, we have a pretty unique emailed in dream. Michael, I know you've been waiting to do this one. You've been pretty excited.
Is this the 9-year-old?
This is the 9-year-old.
Yes!
Yeah. This is our first and only kid dream that we've received, I believe. Yeah, so let's dive in.
Yeah, no, I got very excited about this. It just also, we all know, it's not like a 9-year-old listening to the podcast and writing in. This is the 9-year-old's mother felt that this dream was worthy of investigation, and I got very excited about the idea. So let's hear the dream.
One thing that the mom who emailed us says in the beginning is that he was telling her this dream in vivid detail and said, It felt so real, Ma. It felt so real. Like hours after he had had the dream.
I love
So here we go.
Okay.
I'm speaking from this little boy's perspective. I was at a facility, and, he's describing a medical checkpoint for sickness. If you were sick, you had to stay. Me, Granny, and Hallie, my cousin, weren't sick and got to leave. But you and my brothers had to stay.
So you is mom.
Mom. You is mom.
And brothers. So hang on, I just want to make sure I'm getting all this. Me, dreamer, Granny, and who else?
Hallie, a cousin.
Hallie, cousin. All right. Okay, keep going.
We got to leave, and while we were driving to the top of the mountain, a raven came and took Granny and brought her back. And the mom says he described an adult size with a black cloak and scythe.
Wait. Wait a second. The raven is big.
The raven is adult-sized with a black cloak and a scythe.
Oh, my Lord. And this raven took Granny.
Yeah, but brought her back. Okay, I'll keep going. Hallie didn't notice. I was the only one who could see it. Then we were in the car, and it took Hallie, but it brought her back as well. And Granny didn't notice. It's like I was the only one who could see what was happening. Then the raven came and took me. He took me to a dark room, and I fainted. Then I woke up in the car. We were driving down the road, and I kept seeing the raven flying beside the car looking at me, and I kept fainting. Once we got to Granny's house, we got to have dinner for Hallie's birthday. But Spook, our husky, started barking at the woods, and I knew the raven was there. I walked out to the woods with Spook, and I could feel him. I knew he was there, but I ended up finding a bunch of them. I fainted, and when I woke up with 3 of them holding their scythe over my head, and my spirit got to leave my body, and Spook had a cloak on like the ravens, but he wasn't a spirit. While I was a spirit, I went back to the facility and noticed all of the guards were ravens, and you all had one behind you. He's talking about his mom and his brothers. I got sucked back to my body again. Then I went with Granny and Hallie back to the facility. Then the raven that had been with me since we left the facility was sitting on the hood of the car. He took his mask off and showed me it was Papa. And then he abruptly woke up.
Do we have any information about Papa? As in...
So Papa is the father of Mom, and he passed away in 2015. Yeah.
Okay, this is crazy. Oh my God. This is why I got so excited, right? Like, I glanced at this dream when it came in an email, and I remember sending it to you saying, we've got to get this 9-year-old boy's dream on the show.
It's so intense for such a tiny body, like a tiny human.
Right? Right. All right. Let's sort of break. There's so much to break down here. Let's get started. I think I want to just start with Raven, because clearly this is a dream about an animal totem revealing itself to our dreamer. What's his name?
Dylan.
Dylan's spirit animal is a raven, which is crazy. Ravens are all about magic. They are a very high level totem. You know, first of all, ravens are ridiculously smart. Now, we know that today, that ravens are smart scientifically, but they didn't know that 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, when these, that these animal medicine notions rose up because of the clever ways that crows behave, right? They're crafty, they're smart. So there's a beautiful medicine in Raven that connects us to our sort of spiritual intelligence, a sense of magic and play. There's trickster energy with crow. So that means they communicate important messages to us, but in a trickster way, meaning not direct, sideways, or in synchronicity and happenstance. Anytime there's a raven, I think of Odin, the Norse god king, who had 2 ravens, Hugin and Munin, who were thought and memory. They fly around the world, and they catch the thoughts and the memories of the day, and they come back and they report them to the head, the king of the gods. And I said there's a lot of rich, powerful, magical, alchemical, spiritual guidance medicine when Raven is present. Let's also understand that we've got a pandemic dream. We're literally starting with a pandemic dream. This is a phenomenon that has happened over the last 2 years, where multitudes more people are dreaming dreams that include things like medical facilities, masks, illness, doctors. All of the things associated with pandemics and illness are showing up in dreams where the human race is expressing the stress of the pandemic by an alteration to the dream life. And this is clearly one of them. So we do understand that Dylan is working out some anxieties about what it's like to be a 9-year-old in a global pandemic where people die.
Yeah.
And when you're 9, the idea of people dying is a new construct. That's also deeply spiritual if it's received well. So certainly some of the dream is just processing the stress. And because even in the dream, it's like if you're sick, you can leave. I mean, if you're sick, you have to stay. If you're well, you can leave. And so right there is a stressful idea being expressed. What if I get sick and I have to go or leave or stay, whichever? I'm not getting, I'm not being in the literality of the dream, but the expression or the conflict that's being expressed there is the randomness of this thing that can hit us. and cause some people to die and some people to not die. And that's another just way the dream is expressing some anxiety about living through a global pandemic. Barely interesting to me, though, compared to the richness of the rest of this dream. First of all, I was the only one who could see it was a theme.
Right.
So right there, we've got a dreamer who is understanding, beginning to understand. I'm now the dreamer speaking, I have intuitions, I have observations, I have knowings that other people don't get. Other people can't see what I can see. So when I hear that in the dream space, I wonder if, given the fact that the totem of the raven is so strong, and some of the images that I'm about to talk about are so literally expressing a connection to the mystery, to intuition, to guidance systems that come from other realms, that this notion of periodic moments in the dream where I was the only one that could see it is speaking to that. Dylan is discovering there are things inside him that are purely his in the realm of intuition and perception. I love this idea of the raven taking first Grandma, then Hallie, and then finally me, the dreamer. So if we've decided that the raven is a totem of profound, spiritual, energetic, intuitive, magical medicine, then in the dream, this act of watching the raven take each person and then including the dreamer, that reminds me of what it's like to be initiated into a spiritual sort of awakening. That we're taken somewhere and returned. We go on a journey and we get returned to our body, but we're different when we come back. And first it was Grandma, then it was Hallie, and then himself. So that section of the dream, to me, it's got something to do with understanding how process and integration works. Right? It's not something that most 9-year-olds can understand, but as in the language of depth psychology that asks you to say, if this were my dream, I would see the raven taking each person, including Dylan, is a symbolic representation of the process of going on little hero journeys during our lives to grow and change and transform. Dark room, visiting the shadow, the fainting, losing consciousness, and going into deeper unconscious spaces. Then we're in the car. This is what I love. This is the important piece for me. That once we're back in the car and Dylan can see the raven following, now we're in a symbol of, as I move through my life, I am guided. My magic is always with me. It's not far from me, because the driving the car is a symbol of moving through life. And the raven being right there following is an expression of, as I move forward in my life, I will always have my connection to the divine right there following me. Then we get to this final section of the dream, which is like, it just gets better and better and better to me. So we're at this birthday celebration, right? So I don't have enough information to know. Like, if I knew who Hallie was, and I could talk more about what her birthday in the dream might be, but let's just go with birthday. So if there's a birthday celebration in the dream, then this last section of the dream is about what's being born. What's new that's coming in that we're celebrating? And then we have all of these things that happen in this last section of the dream. First of all, we find out that dog named Spook, love that name, by the way, has access to knowing and understanding the spiritual energies that surround Dylan at this time. Spook knows the raven's in the woods. That's another symbolic expression of expanding the sense of energetic perception to include the dog as having the instinct to know that spirit is close by. So remember, it's not Spook's dream, right? It's Dylan's dream. And even though Spook is a dog, in the inner circle of interpretation, I see the dog in this dream as representing Dylan's instinctual nature, who knows when spirit is close, who's not afraid of the woods, right? And the woods is a symbolic, representation of I will go into the dark places of my psyche to learn more. I won't shrink back from the deeper, darker investigations because that's where all freedom comes from. And so Dylan goes into the woods, where he then finds a bunch of them, right? There's an abundance of ravens into the woods, which is exactly right. You go into those recesses of the shadow of your psyche, and that's where all the wisdom is hanging out. Then we have this powerful three ravens with their scythes. Scythe can cut your head off. And in this moment, there's a sense of that's what's going to happen. And so you can think of the cutting off of the head as letting go of thinking, dropping over analyzing, not relying on intellect, but more on instinct. That's the power of the scythes being held over his head. And the fact that there are three of them makes it a trinity, a holy trinity. And what happens after this happens? Dylan becomes a spirit. I love that. That's another symbol of, wait a minute, am I a person, a human in a body, or am I a spirit? Am I a spiritual being having a human experience? And of course, we are both, and Dylan is learning this in a very big way in this dream.
Wow.
I was then a spirit. Then he says that each person had a raven behind them. This is fucking crazy. That's to see that all of us, each of us, every single one of us has guidance, spirit, wisdom, and assistance that's right behind us.
Yeah.
And in this dream, for a moment, it's the raven archetype. And now this raven is sitting on the car, basically saying, hey, Dylan, now that you've gone through this dream and you understand that you have a spiritual totem that will guide you, sitting right on your car, ready to follow you as you drive through your rest of your life, the raven on the car says, I will guide you. And then when the raven becomes Papa, we get that part of that guidance system that we each receive is through our ancestry. Our ancestors are there, guiding us, propelling us, moving us forward. And this little 9-year-old boy is learning this lesson profoundly in his dream state.
How cool.
This is why I was so excited.
Yeah.
I don't read the dreams that come in. So you know this, and now you all know this. I don't read the dreams that come in because I want to hear them while I'm interpreting them. I don't want to know them in advance. And this one I read because the first line of the email was, my 9-year-old is having a dream. And I was like, oh, I can't resist finding out what your 9-year-old is dreaming, so much so that you wrote in about it. And then when I read the dream, I was like, we have to talk about this dream on the podcast.
Yeah.
So thank you, Dylan.
Yes, thank you, Dylan. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the Daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.